and welcome back to the Ghoul Guide Association, the show where we talk about all things gothic and pop culture. And that, of course, includes spooky, scary horror movies. And it is that time of the month where Mary does her horror movie rundown. This is a So You Don't Like Horror episode. Did I get it right that time, Mary?
Yes, you did. And the way that you said it made me feel a bit like a werewolf, where once a month it's that time, the moon comes out, and
Mary talks to Lauren about horror.
Yeah.
I like it.
So yeah, this is the podcast for horror fans and non-horror fans alike. So obviously I'm a big horror fan, love watching anything to do with horror. And Lauren, I know you love all things spooky, but sometimes you feel like you just can't watch a horror film because it might be too violent or
Yes.
too much of something. So I am here to take you through some of the recent releases, let you know if you are also a scaredy cat like Lauren, if there's a film that you can watch, or give you a bit more information about films so you can make more of an informed choice whether to watch a certain film or not. Or if you decide not to, I will spoil them. So
Yeah,
this is a podcast with spoilers. I do try and signpost the big spoilers, but obviously part of it is that if you can't watch horror films but you want to get involved, I'm going to tell you.
You want to live vicariously through Mary.
Yeah.
If you are also a traumatized chicken shit like me, and you want to experience the spooks without experiencing the spooks, Mary has you.
So you may have noticed that we are, I guess, a little bit late with our kind of monthly releases, offering to the werewolf moon god. I'll just say on Halloween, my partner and I got civil partnered. Is that how you say it? Civil partnered.
Yeah. You entered into a civil partnership.
Yes. Which Lauren was there, and it was very nice and spooky, and I had a great time, and now that's done.
It was a lovely day. If you follow us on Instagram, you might have wondered why we were in a chapel in a cemetery with shit tons of pumpkins.
Yeah.
Actually, you might not have wondered why, because that's very on brand for us, but that's why we were in a chapel in a cemetery with a shit ton of pumpkins, was for Mary's ship.
My partner Craig spent the night before carving about 20 or 30 pumpkins.
30 pumpkins.
Yeah, so do check out our Instagram if you want to see some of those pumpkins. But yeah, that's just a little bit of an explanation as to why we are quite just a little bit behind. We might try and in the next few months, and as we go into the next year, try and get a bit more on schedule with that. But we're human. We have stuff going on, and sometimes we get a bit busy. And it turns out trying to organize a civil partnership in about 3 months, I think.
I think when you told me about it, you were like, yeah, it'll be fine. There's not that much to do. And I was like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And then about 4 weeks later, when we were in TK Maxx, like trawling through all of the Halloween decor, it was like, oh, we've got to do this, so we've got to do this. But it was all worth it, and they pulled it off, and it was majestic. Yes. We had a great time, and it was very on theme.
Yes, it was a good way to spend Halloween, I think. And very grateful for you, Lauren, for being a part of it.
Thanks.
But let's get to the episode, shall we?
Sarcastic. Thanks. I was just jealous that it wasn't me and Mary. For the record, I'm kidding.
So let's get into this episode proper then. And as always, we
Woo!
are going to be starting with our audience recommends section, where you get to recommend horror films for us to watch. And this one is a correction from the last one that we did, because I I got it wrong, but helpfully, thankfully, Marla sent us in a correction, and then also in the intervening weeks, like literally, I think the week after we recorded that podcast, I then saw the film that Marla was talking about, and I was like, oh, I got that wrong. But yeah, thank you, Marla, for your correction and also for your recommendation, and I will say the correct one now. So Silencio is Marla's fabulous recommendation, and this is a film that's directed by Eduardo Casanova. The UK premiere will be at the Soho Horror Film Festival on the 23rd of November. So it's literally, as of recording, it's just premiered like a few days ago. But that's why I hadn't seen it, because it hasn't been released in the UK yet. And I think it is being released soon. But I'm very jealous, because when I saw the poster for this film, it looks amazing, and then also when I read the description, I was like, this is so my jam. I just cannot go to another film festival. But this is essentially set in Europe during the Black Death. So there's lots of plague going around, and there's a group of vampire sisters who are basically struggling to survive, because there's a scarcity of essentially clean human blood. But there's also this kind of tension between what's the actual poison here. Is it the disease, or is it the social silence that kind of comes with that? And then we have like another like kind of time jump, and then the film also focuses on their descendants centuries later in Spain during the AIDS pandemic. So it's kind of like juxtaposing these two pandemics, and also then looking at the social stigma that surrounds that through the lens of the vampire. So I haven't seen this film yet, but yeah, it sounds really good. And
That does sound good.
Yeah, I really want to watch it, and I'm very jealous. But yes, thank you so much, Marla. And if you have a recommendation that you want us to share, then get in touch. Send us an email, leave a comment under this episode, send us a message, and we will feature it in our next episodes. But with that, Lauren, are you ready to dive into some films that I have seen?
I am, because, as you know, I think there's at least one film on your list from this month that I had explicitly said
yes,
that you had to see for me so that I could find out if I could see it.
Yeah. I'm saving that film till last. So
keeping us on tenterhooks.
Yes. But I'm going to start with one that I saw, I feel like right at the beginning of October, so it feels like a very long time ago now, but it's Him. Adding to the plethora of pronoun horror films, she, her, they, they/them, it. We have Him. Us.
That's why it took me a second, because I was like, which one is him?
Which one is him? So you've heard of this? Have you seen anything about this?
Yeah, so this crossed my timeline, periphery, For You page, whatever you want to call it. I think because of my scholarly interests in masculinity and masculine identities, because obviously I study the military identity, but then that often branches out to what I call militarized identities, and sports often come under militarized identities because there's some overlap there, and that I think that's why they started popping up for me.
Yeah. So this film is essentially what I would call a sports horror film, which I, on the one hand, I'm not really a sports person. So
In case
I'm
you
kind of
couldn't
like,
tell by our general demeanors, appearances, the podcast.
but I love stuff that's like a really different angle of horror. So I was really interested in this. This film is directed by Justin Tipping, and the screenplay is written by Skip Bronke, Zach Akers, and Justin Tipping. But you also are probably, if you have or haven't or have only like heard of this a little bit, it's produced by Monkey Paw, which is Jordan Peele's production company. So I think like a lot of the marketing for this film has been, produced by Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people going into this film were expecting a Jordan Peele film. And I think the reaction to this film has been quite mixed. And I think it's because of those expectations.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that I really liked this film. I really enjoyed it, as we'll get into in a bit. But I think that understanding that it's not a Jordan Peele film, but at the same time it does have some sensibilities that I think lend it to being produced by Monkey Paw Productions, in that it is, as you have said, Lauren, it is about masculinity, being a man in America, specifically through that kind of sports lens, and also specifically because it's about American football through that kind of racialized lens as well. So you have like a lot of racial and gender politics going on in the film, which again, I think somebody watching the trailer and seeing all the marketing, you might think, oh, this is a Jordan Peele film. And it
heavily and it makes sense, if Jordan Peele is your producer, it makes sense. If you're the marketing company, you're gonna put the big name on, because I imagine this is quite a hard film to market. A horror movie about American football, about masculinity, about race and identity. And I, as soon as I saw the trailer, was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Not only because of the political climate, but because of all of the stuff that's come out recently about the traumatic brain injury that a lot of American football players suffer from, that fundamentally changes people's personality. It can turn them very violent. It's a horrendous injury that they experience, but you often don't know they have it. And it's only diagnosable after death, which there's so many aspects, like the way the draft works, the way that college football works. Like, there's so many aspects to me of American football that lend itself, I think, so well to horror. I don't think you could do a horror film about soccer. I'm using the American term. Don't come for me. I know I'm British. Sorry, Dad. But I don't think you could do... My dad works in football, just for context there. I don't think you could do a horror film about football in the way that you can do a horror film about American football. So it did really fascinate me. And I'm glad to hear you enjoyed it, because I was
really
hopeful this was a good film.
I really enjoyed it. And I think that some of the criticism is a bit unfair. I think it's really enjoyable, and also because it is specifically American football, it does lend itself to that kind of violence, which is to then, I guess, preface it by saying, Lauren, unfortunately, I do not think you can watch this film. So
I could tell from the trailer there was so much blood in the trailer. There's so much. To be fair, I mean, I've only ever watched the Super Bowl once, and that was Super Bowl. Sorry, not Super Bowl.
Are you talking about the superb owl?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I've only ever watched it once, and that was because I went to an event where it was on. But even just a normal game of American football can be really violent and really bloody. So I think it makes sense that a movie would be. But yeah, I saw the trailer and I was like, even the poster's got blood on it. I don't think I can watch this film.
So that, I guess, is my first kind of content warning. If you are thinking about or considering whether to watch this film, if you like violence or if you don't like violence, this film has a lot of that. So just be wary when you go in that it will have a lot of physical violence, especially. So, okay, what is the film about? So it follows a young man called Cameron Cade, and he is played by Tyreek Withers, and he is a young up and coming football player who is kind of, as you kind of mentioned there, he's coming from college football, and he's hoping to get drafted into a kind of national league. He essentially suffers a head injury, and he's worried that he's going to miss the draft. But he kind of pushes
Mhm.
through. But you are always aware that because he has this head injury and he has like a big scar in his head and kind of big stitches, you're aware as the film goes on, and he kind of goes through the physical sports training, and puts his body under pressure, that he is very literally like being held together at the seams, and what he's doing is
Mhm.
even more so than if he hadn't had that brain injury or that head injury. He is putting his body under immense pressure, which I think is just like kind of, an emphasizing of that manifestation of the body, the importance of the body.
Mhm.
And I think that is one of, there's lots of different facets of the horror in this film, but it is very much a body horror. So if you watch like The Substance, I think this would go really well with that, because it's all about
Interesting.
like the peak ideal body, but where The Substance is about women, this is about very much, what is the peak idea of a
That's really
man's
interesting.
physique.
I read an article, and I wish that I could remember, but obviously I wasn't expecting to need it, but I read an article around the time the last Super Bowl,
Mm.
or maybe the one before, the one Taylor Swift was there. Um, but I remember reading an article that was about the way that American football commodifies young black bodies,
Hmm.
and it was talking about, and I think it was either a sports scientist or potentially someone who's either family member or something, like it was someone with a close relationship, and they were saying, like, particularly at the moment, like the racial divide is so wide and there's so much tension, and yet the biggest entertainment event of the year profits off black bodies pushing themselves to the extreme and young black men pushing themselves and having this physicality, but they don't make the millions and millions that the advertising makes. The Super Bowl ads are like the biggest ad spot of the year and all of this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking at the time, that's such a gothic reality, and like there's so much space here for a gothic take and a gothicization, and that sounds like this is what him is doing, is using those different aspects, the brain injury, the intensity, the commodification, to play into those ideas of consuming and monstrosity and horror.
100%, I think that's exactly what this film is doing. So there are essentially two big players in this film.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Cameron Cade, and then you have another character called Isaiah White. Now, Isaiah White is played by Marlon Wayans, who
Oh,
you
okay.
might recognize from Scary Movie. Um,
Yeah.
um,
Amazing comedy actor.
he's also so good in this, and he essentially plays like the best quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So don't come at me. I don't know what a quarterback is. All I know is that they are like one of the most
They
important
play
things in
at the quarter
American.
back, clearly, of the
You know,
field.
you're not here for sports analysis.
They
But
catch and they run.
but what I can tell you is that the film starts with a very young Cameron Cade, and he's watching the Super Bowl with his dad. So immediately there, you have this kind of narrative of the importance of masculinity and
Mm-hmm.
family, but that idea of wanting to
Yeah.
live up to the expectations of your dad, and they're watching Isaiah White play, and he wins, and it's amazing. But you can also see that they have this shrine. I'm kind of call it a shrine because it's like a kind of, there's bits of Jesus there, but then there's also like family and Isaiah
Mm-hmm.
White, and it's very much in this kind of religious iconography, which the film then obviously builds on. And obviously, Isaiah is a very biblical name. It's one of the
Mhm.
4 major prophets in the Bible, and the name Isaiah means Yahweh is salvation. So I think that's immediately really interesting that you have these 2 black men, and the younger one is looking up to the older one, and there is this idea of salvation, and
Mhm.
I guess a kind of idolatry, and also that kind of peak male physique,
Mhm.
which you can also then, it's there's a lot of overlap with saviors and messianism, and
Mhm.
literally seeing a man, a human, as in this kind of Christ-like way, which we will get to in a bit. Obviously, it has some issues if you are following like Christianity, and is there something that is wrong and satanic going on here? Like maybe Isaiah White is a false prophet. I think all of these
Mhm.
kinds of religious narratives are there from that very beginning. But essentially, one of the positions being drafted for, in the main narrative, is Isaiah White is retiring, and it's who's going to take his place. And the Isaiah and his kind of team want to choose Cameron Cade. So he goes to the draft, and he plays, and then he gets selected. He goes to Isaiah White's very, very secluded compound. Essentially, it's like it's isolated, it's in the desert, it's got all of these fancy equipment, it's got like a training space, it's also like walled off, so you've got all this security there. There's
Yeah.
like weird groupies that kind of hang out outside, and there's one bit where Cameron Cade is going in to the compound, and these women just kind of, and men, they come over to the car because they think it might be Isaiah, and then as
Mhm.
soon as they see that it's not, they're so disappointed, but almost to the point of violence, which kind
Yeah.
of just ratchets up that whole idea, that concept of hero worship. And then the majority of the film essentially kind of goes into a mix of body horror and psychological horror, where Cameron Cade is being trained and undergoing all of these sessions that Isaiah White is putting him through. Some of it is running. He goes into like these ice baths. He's also injecting him, and it turns out that he's injecting him with his own blood, which is very, very weird. And
Oh,
it's
that's
and
super biohacky.
yeah, and it's very much kind of Cameron Cade is almost descending into this um horrific kind of version of himself. He's been cut off from his
Mhm.
family. He's not allowed any contact. He's pushing himself physically. There are times where, he probably pushes himself too far. You can see obviously he has the head injury, and it's very much a kind of ratcheting up of this tension, and how far can he push, and how much does he want this? Is it worth this pain now, but then also the fact that there will be continual pain? He'll have to keep doing this. How much does he want to be the new Isaiah White? And
Mhm.
here then is where, if you want to save this film, if you want to watch this film,
This is where you
the
stop.
I'm gonna spoil the ending. So skip ahead to the next film, because I'm gonna spoil it, because at this point you're kind of thinking this is a body horror, this is a psychological horror, and it's really, really interesting. Um,
Mhm.
but what else is happening? And throughout the film, there have been these weird flashes of behind Cameron Cade. There's been like this kind of weird figure, a kind of shadowy, almost demonic figure. And this is the kind of third aspect of the horror that this film encapsulates, and it's the demonic. He essentially learns that, and we learn that um, Isaiah was also chosen in the same way that Cameron Cade has chosen. And they have to have this kind of physical battle between them where one of them will be victorious. And then essentially Cameron Cade will be the new Isaiah White. And there's this whole, they have this physical fight, and it's very, very violent, and it ends up being outside in a kind of football esque type thing that Cade has in the compound. But there's all of these figures who are masked, and you're like, oh, what is happening here? And they're offering him a contract. They're saying, yes, you've earned this, you've won, this is yours. And then even then you're kind of thinking, is this still just for show? Like, is there actually, it's done a lot, it does a lot of weird kind of editing where you're still kind of like, is this all in his head? But there is definitely this nefarious group that are controlling things. And essentially, in signing over this contract, he would be signing over his body to this. Is it satanic?
Okay.
Is it not satanic? But it's definitely this group controlling it. And now I'm not into sports. I'm not into American sports. But what I am into is American politics. And when I was watching that, I was like, this really reminds me of Colin Kaepernick and the way that he has been blacklisted. So if you're not familiar with Colin Kaepernick, he is an American football player. Maybe he's a quarterback. I don't know. Whatever.
I've got no idea.
I've got no idea. But he, during the Black Lives Matter kind of movement, he consulted with a lot of military veterans and people currently serving about how can I protest for Black Lives Matter but still be respectful. And they all he got all of this advice and he decided, I'm going to kneel. This is essentially where the kneeling comes from. He decided
Taking the knee.
during the national anthem in the stadium that he was going to kneel. So it's still showing respect, but it's also acknowledging his protest. People did not like this. And when I say people, I mean white people. He did not get
particularly the Cheeto.
Yes, he did not get selected. And he and I think others have also argued that since then he's been put on a blacklist, and that people in this kind of this group of people who own these football clubs essentially have all colluded and decided not to hire him, which is wild because apparently, again, I'm not a sports person, but apparently he is like one of the best, if not the best at the time. So when I was watching this film, I was like, this is like the opposite. It's basically like a mirror image of what happened with Colin Kaepernick. This man, Cameron Cade, is being offered everything. He just has to sign himself over. But in Colin Kaepernick, his decision essentially broke that contract, and so therefore you have this this cabal of people who are in control, essentially asserting their power.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's kind of like so this is really weird. The only reason I know this is because I watched a documentary about a young Hawaiian player who was catfished, and he was like the most promising player of his year, and basically he didn't make the draft because all the story came out about the catfish. There was a lot of really transphobic rhetoric. It was awful, and it ruined his career. And I had not realized how much money college football in particular makes, and that the reason that they put all of this emphasis onto college football is because it is a multi-million-dollar industry. And the colleges themselves make a huge amount of money. They sell merch. They, obviously the tickets. I'm thinking like, I went to university in Bath, not the university I went to, but the other university had like the best university rugby team in the country. And sometimes people would come and watch Bath Uni play rugby. But even then, it was still university rugby. Like it was a big deal if you maybe liked rugby, but I had not realized that college football is this huge, huge, huge deal. And they basically don't get an education because all they are trained to do is play football. They're on the bus, they're on the training field, they're signing autographs, they're doing they are being trained to be stars, but only some of them will get drafted and only some of them will make it big. And it's that kind of thing of like, you gotta sell your soul to the cabal, because not only are the college teams making all this money, then the next line up, the actual teams are making all this money. And if you want to be successful, you have to sell your soul to them, because you can't have a political stance and you can't do anything, because if you don't, you're not going to make them shit tons of money and they're not going to invest in you. Because I'd wondered if this was like a bit of a demonic possession type film when I'd seen the trailer, that they were training him to be the new avatar for something. But then that also lines up with it being like, it kind of reminds me of Mariana Enriquez's Our Share of Night, where like there's a cult and it's basically full of rich white Argentinians. And it's all about like maintaining status and power and wealth, like through the consumption of others and things like that. But yeah, that's really interesting that there is this shadowy cabal of like masked people and demonic entities, and that you have to there can only be one. You have to beat the last one to become the next one.
Yeah, and so up until this point, the figures in the masks, they are just humans, and they're people that we've seen in relation to Cameron at various parts of his journey, and you kind of, it's revealed that they've basically been like shaping his life to get him to this point. So you can see that it's not really exactly a choice that he's given. It's, he's been selected and I guess groomed in a non-sexual way. There's a bit earlier in the film where he's having a conversation with Isaiah White, where Isaiah says, like, you know, imagine if you're in prison and you're starving, and I offer you food or your freedom. What are you going to take? And I thought that was really interesting. And then I was thinking about it when it got to this end bit, because I'm like, that's essentially what he's making, the choice that he's making. Are you hungry? Do you want food and fame and celebrity and adoration? Or do you want your freedom? And this film, I think the reason why I love this film so much is because of the ending. He has the, you know, he could sign the contract, but he doesn't. Instead, he murders everyone very, very violently, and then a demon shows up, and that's the end of the film. And I'm like, I love that, because it is him refusing to sign that
Cycle
contract.
breaking.
He's breaking the cycle, and he's also acknowledging that, like, you know, false choices are not choices, and you know, you don't have, you know, it's hard. It was hard because now he's, you know, he's screwed. Like, he's not going to be a footballer. In no way is he going to be a footballer. And also, what's going to happen with this demon? We don't know. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was really interesting, and I think yeah, I personally think that some of the criticism of it is really unfair. I thought it was really, really good.
Interesting.
And I wish that you could watch it. It was one of those,
wish I could watch it.
Yeah, it was one of those where I was like, this would be, Lauren would love this, but also she would not.
Someone make me a novelization.
Yes.
I'll settle for a graphic novel. Actually, that's more work.
Well, you heard it here, folks. You know, if anyone wants to, dramatize this in any way, you know, we would
send it our way.
Send it our way. We'd appreciate that.
Okay, so good. A high rating for him.
Yeah, him. Great. Loved it. The next
Not
one,
often we say that.
No. Okay, so the next film that I want to talk about is one that I mentioned that I was looking forward to in the last episode. And this is Good Boy. And Good Boy, I think, is now
the dog film.
It's the dog film. It's now on Shudder. So if you didn't get a chance to see it in the cinema or at film festivals, you can, I think, watch it, stream it, have a look if it's on whatever platform you use. But it is essentially a dog. It's a horror film told through the perspective of a dog, which I think is such an interesting concept. It's directed by Ben Leonberg, and this is his directorial debut, and it's written by Alex Cannon and Ben Leonberg. And the star of the show, and genuinely this star applies to this being so much is the dog. It is Leonberg's own dog, which is a Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever dog. I've never heard of that before, but I think it's it's like a, I don't know, quite a well-known breed slash crossbreed. I don't know.
Is it a big dog?
Yeah, like a mid-size. It's a retriever mix.
Oh,
Very
okay.
cute, very cute. Yeah, Google the poster and you'll see the dog is called Indy, and he plays essentially himself. And I think that it's really cute. So there's not that many other like of in the supporting cast. So the other people in this film are Shane Jensen, who plays Indy's human, Ariel Friedman, who plays Shane's sister, and also Larry Fessenden, who is their father,
Ah.
essentially.
Mhm.
And we follow Indy and Indy's human, Todd. And Todd, we learn, has chronic lung disease. So this is one, I would say, if you're looking for a content warning for films, this is very much about like illness and death and grief.
Mhm.
So if those are any of your triggers, or if you feel a bit uncomfortable, then this is maybe not the film for you, which is a shame, because I think the dog concept is so good, but there is just all the way through, like, it
To
is
be
all
fair,
about,
dog mov
yeah,
dog movies are always sad and about grief.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
um,
that is what dog mo I don't watch dog movies usually because 'cause I'm like, "They're gonna make me cry,"
yeah, yeah,
so I don't
yeah.
watch the dog movie.
Well, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, because this is something that Ben Leonberg says a lot. The dog does not die in this film. So
Which is a
it's not,
key.
it's, yes. So it, like, if you're like, oh, I love watching films with dogs, but also they always die, that's part of the reason why he made this film, because he was like, I want a film where the dog doesn't die.
Yep.
But yeah, so Todd has got chronic lung disease, and he moves into his grandfather's or father's home, who is played by Larry Fessenden. And you see him watching tapes, and so you only see like Larry Fessenden through these tapes. Um,
Mhm.
but he moves in away from the city, and he's essentially dying, and it is just him and his dog in this home. And there is a kind of malevolent supernatural presence that is gradually engulfing Todd in this house.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
and essentially, Indy, the dog, has to kind of, is trying to rescue him.
Dog saves the
Uh,
day.
yes. So Ben Leonberg came up with this idea after rewatching Poltergeist, where, he was essentially, this happens in horror films a lot, where it's the dog that senses something supernatural in a haunted house first. So
Yeah.
this is a quote. I think it comes from a thought, or maybe worry, every dog owner has, which is, why is my dog barking at nothing or staring at nothing?
Yeah.
There's probably a perfectly valid reason for that, but the human imagination can't help but think the worst. Think of ghosts. I wanted to play on that anxiety. So that is essentially where the inspiration for the film comes from.
From that perspective, I'm surprised no one has done this sooner because we watch a lot of ghost hunting shows, and the amount of times that part of I think, like, one of the big famous, I think it might be the Bel Air house,
Mm,
that's supposed to have a demonic possession. One of the, like, stories is that the dog is, like, growling at things, and the dog tries, like, there's often a dog in these, like, famous haunted houses that growls at something or keeps going over to something. So I'm surprised no one's thought sooner to be like, this is a really good concept for a horror movie.
yeah. I think the concept is really great. I have, I guess, mixed feelings about, now that I've seen the film, I have mixed feelings about it. Not in terms of like, Indy is amazing and
Mhm.
genuinely the true star of the show. Give that dog all of the treats. Like, that dog deserves everything. And they
Mhm.
also, I think that the kind of the mechanics and the filming of it are really interesting, and it's really well done. So you often don't see human faces humans are shot from behind or from below.
Mhm.
So a lot of the camera is shot from a dog's level. And you often can't see, because you can't see people's faces. I think on the one hand, it's really interesting because then you get more of a kind of
Mhm.
a dog's visual perspective. But also I can see when filming, it means that you can just dub in the audio later. So I bet that was like, really easy, easier, because you could give Indy the commands and stuff that you
Mhm.
needed, and then just put the actual like dialogue in post. But also, like, stylistically, it looks gorgeous and it's beautifully shot. I just think, for me, they're essentially, and this is a spoiler, so if you don't want this film spoiled, then skip ahead. But for me, there isn't really anything supernatural going on, and
Okay.
it's essentially just that the Indy's human is dying, and it's him passing on.
Oh,
Um,
no, that's heartbreaking. So is it like Explain Supernatural? There's not a ghost, the dog is just processing its awareness of the fact it's humans dying.
Essentially, yeah.
Oh,
And which
no, that's
which
that's
I
really
think is
sad.
is an interesting concept, but it's not the concept that I actually would like, which is a
Yeah,
horror film but told through the perspective of a dog. So
yeah,
I think that this film is good. I think for me it was just wasn't quite what I wanted, and
yeah,
also I think I don't want to say I felt a bit cheated, but it didn't live up to the kind of idea, I guess, for
yeah.
me personally. Which isn't to say that it's not a good film. And I will just finish by highlighting some of the awards that have been won by this film. So South by Southwest Film and TV Festival, they awarded the film the Howl of Fame for Best Canine Performance, which very much
That's
deserved.
too cute.
The People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals awarded this film the Great Filmmaking Award. Again, I think really, really well deserved. And the Strasbourg European Fantastic Film Festival, it also won the Best International Feature Film Award. So, I think there's lots of things to like take away from this film and
Yeah.
be like, yes, this is good. And probably one that I think that you could watch if you're in the mood for a big grief, illness, death film.
Yeah,
Uh,
which is, as I said, usually why I avoid, but maybe, I do
yeah,
there's something very powerful to the idea of, like, we know that dogs and cats can sense when their humans are ill, and how would a dog interpret that? And would they interpret it as some terrifying force that they wanna get away from their human? And that is a really, in some ways, I suppose, beautiful way
yeah,
of, going about it. Probably won't be watching it during, sad season.
no,
I
no. Which is
feel
why,
like
yeah,
that might tip me over the edge.
which is why I do try and, explain what the films are about and what potential like triggers or like, things that people
Yeah.
might need to be aware of before you watch this
Might
or
save
commit
that
to it.
one for the season of regular depression, April to
Yeah.
September.
Um, but
Okay.
if you do want a little pick me up, then just go and like Google clips of Indy, because Indy is
Yeah.
such a good boy.
A well-deserved title.
Yes. Okay, so finally, my final new release that I want to talk to you about is Bugonia, which is
Yes.
one of the latest creative endeavors by Yorgos Lanthimos. And it is, as you would expect from a Yorgos Lanthimos film,
Mhm.
very weird. So
Yes.
this
If you've
screenplay,
seen Poor Things, you
yeah,
know what we mean.
yeah. So this screenplay was by Will Tracy, and it's actually an adaptation of the 2003 South Korean science fiction black comedy Save the Green Planet by Yang Yon Hwan, which I might have pronounced wrong. But Save the Green Planet. So Lauren, I know you love Korean media or
I
Korean media.
I had never heard
No,
of this
yeah.
film when Craig
Uh,
told me about it. I mean, I suppose, like, 2003, my
mhm.
consumption of Korean pop culture and media didn't really start until like 2010, just by the nature of the internet. I was 14 in 2013 in 2003. So yeah, I had never heard of this film. But then when Craig told me, it made a lot of sense
Mhm.
because quite a lot of the Korean film and TV I have watched has this idea of like so there's quite a few where there's like so there's a drama called My Love from Another Star. There's one about a mermaid. Like there's quite often this concept where like somebody is a supernatural being or
Yeah.
maybe a robot or maybe an alien. And sometimes it's a romantic drama and sometimes it's like a psychological thriller or something like that. So actually when I thought about it, I was like, that makes sense. And I want to watch it now because I can
Yeah.
imagine I really like Korean black comedy.
Yeah.
It always really gets me, and I do find it genuinely really funny in the way that I do. Sometimes horror comedy is too much for me, but yeah, quite a few Korean black comedy films I've really enjoyed so far, like Parasite.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen Save the Green Planet yet because I do want to see it. But if anyone listening has seen it and can say if let us know. Let us know if you liked it, if
Hmm.
it's any good. Because I think I think both you and I would probably love to watch it. And also I just like
Yes.
hearing what people like and enjoy. But yeah, this film stars Emma Stone, her latest collaboration with Yorgos Lanthimos. She plays Michelle Fuller, who is the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. And the other main players in this film are Jesse Plemons, and he
Hmm.
plays Teddy Gatz. Um, and then we also have Aidan Delbis as Don, who is Teddy's intellectually disabled cousin. So there's your three. There are a few other people in this film, but they're your kind of like three big characters.
Hmm.
And Teddy is essentially a conspiracy theory obsessed beekeeper, and he convinces his cousin that they need to abduct Michelle because she's an alien. Um, Specifically an Andromedan. And so they force her. Their idea is that they will kidnap her and then force her to arrange a meeting between them and the Andromedan Emperor, um, which will happen during an upcoming lunar eclipse, which is when the Andromedan ships kind of come to Earth. So, as conspiracy
Sure.
theories go, yeah, quite standard actually.
Yeah, yeah,
Quite standard.
actually.
The reason why Teddy wants this meeting is he believes that Andromedans are killing the Earth's honeybees, thereby destroying our ecosystem and forcing humans into numb subservience. Anyone who knows anything about ecology knows that bees are so important to
Hmm.
everything, and
Hmm.
we need to save the bees. So on the one hand, and especially as he is a beekeeper who would understand their importance, I get it. He wants to save the planet. Save the bees, save the planet,
And
that kind of thing.
maybe he's seen sci-fi classic Jupiter Ascending, in which Sean Bean, a half bee alien man, confidently assures Mila Kunis that the bees recognize the queen, and that's how they know she's the alien queen. So
Exactly, exactly.
maybe he too has seen that cinematic masterpiece
There
and
is,
knows that
yeah,
aliens are
there
interested in bees.
there is a logic in his conspiracy theory, um, and there is also, he's doing it with good intent, shall we say?
Hmm.
So he and Teddy put this plan into action, and they kidnap Michelle. And this is where the black comedy comes in. Their kidnapping of Michelle is very funny. I think you would enjoy it. Um,
Yeah.
they are obviously successful, but she does manage to get away for a little bit and run into her garden, and it's very funny. And I think you are meant to
Hmm.
find this absurd because obviously, this is absurd.
Yeah.
They take Michelle into their basement. They shave her head and cover her in an antihistamine cream and then tie her down. And the reason why they shave her head and cover her in this cream, and if you've seen posters of this film, you'll probably think, why does Emma Stone look so pale, or like has like she
Yeah.
has stuff on her face, and why she got no hair? This is why. It is specifically so that her Andromedan brethren will be unable to locate her, because obviously hair is really important to communicate to the Andromedans, and also the antihistamine cream will also hinder that communication. So there is, again, a logic in what appears to be
Because aliens use
descent into madness.
histamines to communicate, of course.
Yeah. And then he also subjects her. So he has her kind of tied in the basement. She cannot leave, and she is, tied down. He interrogates her. She obviously is very confused as to what is happening. Come on, you don't really think that I'm Andromedan, right? And then he does subject her to electroshock therapy. So this is a black comedy. There is, I guess there are gender issues at play here that maybe, if that's difficult, then this might be one to kind of be wary of. But I think ultimately it plays out in a way that I think does kind of make sense. And then we also learn that Teddy's mother had been ill, and that she had been a participant in a clinical trial for the drug oxalate, which was a trial run by Michelle's company, and that had rendered her comatose. So you're also kind of thinking, is this why he's focusing on Michelle specifically? Because his mum is now in hospital, and he and his cousin are together, and they're poor, and he's in a job, packing, and it's this kind of, poverty stuff. I am not going to spoil this film, so I am going to leave my review of Bugonia here, because if I tell you what actually happens, I think it genuinely will spoil the film for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, but what I will say is that the last 5-10 minutes, it does descend into a whole kind of like, well, the Earth is doomed, isn't it? And there is a horrible montage that really focuses on the finite nature of humanity and how we are destroying ourselves and being destroyed. And it is very... watching this in the cinema was really interesting, because it's so funny. It's so funny and absurd. And then the ending is really interesting. And then you get to the last 10 minutes, and then you're kind of like... okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I obviously didn't know it would be at the end, but the tone I got from the film being this whole, like, they think she's destroying the planet and the bees and everything, I could tell there was a kind of, like, environmental narrative to it. And that was why I was like, can I watch this? Because famously, apocalypse narratives don't sit well with my brain. So that's why I was like, Mary.
Yes. And I think if you want to avoid all of that apocalypse stuff, then as soon as it comes on, just turn it off. Like, you don't need the end. You'll know it's a montage, all that kind of stuff. But the kind of the tension kind of ratchets up to a point where she takes him back to her place of work, because she says that, I will organize this meeting for you then, and there's a portal in my office. We just have to go into the closet in my office, and I'll take you there. I'm not going to spoil it.
Cool.
But, it's quite a funny scene that ends it. But yeah.
Also, I'm laughing at portal in my like closet, because if any of you are like true crime followers, or cult or like religious fanaticism interest, or even conspiracy theorist interest, you might be aware that Chad Daybell and Laurie Vallow thought that they were communicating with each other psychically through portals in their closets. Which is why that made me laugh, because Why the closet? I'm sure
Yeah,
there probably is a reason. But yeah, okay, interesting.
interesting.
Begonia. I will watch that one and then I will let you know my thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, so some interesting film offerings this month. Have you got a retrospective for us?
I do. And I think that you know that I went to see one of these, because I did go and see this in the cinema, but I also remembered that I saw another film that I thought would then be a really nice retrospective. So what this month, my retrospective, I'm calling The Silent Horror of Robert Wiene, which I think is how you pronounce his name. It's German, so apologies if I have pronounced that wrong. Um, but Robert Wiene was a German filmmaker who created
Mhm.
a number of like landmark expressionist films in the silent era. So we're talking like the 1920s, the start of the birth of cinema proper, and also the start of horror cinema. And quite a lot of his films blend the aesthetics of folk tales with cubism and surrealism and expressionism and
Mhm.
futurism, and they're also responding to the chaos of World War I. So I think there's like a I know that you know some of his films, and I know that you like them. But yeah, like following the Nazi rise to power in Germany, Wiener, who was of Jewish descent, he essentially fled Germany. Um,
Mhm.
so he's really important to Germany's like cinema history and the creation of this. But then I also think that it is important to recognize that he is Jewish as well, and
Mhm.
this is kind of like I guess now that because we are looking back at history, we know what's coming. We can see some of those kinds of things that are foreshadowing what's to come, I think,
Yeah.
in his films.
Yeah.
Okay, the first film is the one that I know you will be familiar with, which is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari,
I
which,
love that film.
yes, this was released in 1920 and it was written by Karl Mayer and Hans Janowitz. It also stars Werner Krauss as the titular hypnotist, Dr. Caligari. And I put in my notes a little asterisks because and I actually have been writing a lot about Werner Krauss for an essay that I've just written on Shylock. He was a really, really famous, prominent German actor, and unlike Robert Wiener, who was Jewish and fled, when the Nazis rose to power, Krauss was like, "Great, this is my jam." So I think that it is important to recognize that he
Mhm.
have someone who really like flourished under the Nazi regime, and he starred as Shylock, and he was what's known as like a state actor. But
Mhm.
here in this period, it is before that happened. But yeah, he is the hypnotist. It also stars Conrad Veidt as the somnambulist Caesar, also Frederick Fayer as Francis, and Lily Degova as Jane. And this film, I think, is really important. If you haven't seen it, it has been described as the first true horror film. So I think any fan of horror or
Yeah.
the Gothic, you should watch this film. Um, Conrad Veidt also, so he wasn't Jewish. I just think this is just an interesting bit of if we're looking at the kind of biographies of the people involved in this film, his wife was Jewish, and he would often write himself down as being Jewish in form,
Interesting.
as kind of solidarity. And then
Yeah.
when the Nazis came to power, he and his wife also fled Germany. So I think that it is, important to look at this film in that kind of
Mhm.
context, because it is very much in that kind of in between the First World War
Yeah.
and then before the rise of the Nazis.
I think especially when we think about like that interwar period and the
mm,
tensions, like one of the things I think about the First and the Second World War is we often see them as like parallels or extensions of each other, because, you know, the way that history tells it, it's Britain versus Germany and then Britain versus Germany again. And actually, that's very much not the case. And what you've actually got is like a long history of colonialism and empire and oppression. And you've got all of these different, like, scenes of tension and rebellion, of what it means to be a national identity, a gender identity, a religious identity. And they're two very different wars fought on very different principles. Like, the
Yeah.
First World War is a war of empire, and the Second World War is a war of ideals and ideology. And the Second World War really changes the game in terms of like how war is perceived and how war is fought and why war is fought. And unfortunately, that's one of the reasons it's so glorified, which, shocker, I disagree with. Um, but I think that interwar period and the literature and the film of that interwar period is so important, because yeah, it's not a war of who is, oh, well, we own that land and you own that land and we want that land back. It is about ideologies, and it is about beliefs in a way that war never really had been before, because even the French Revolutionary War wasn't really about that once
Yeah.
it got going. Um, and yeah, I think it's so important to look at something like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and think about what is shaping up in that period of time.
Yeah, and obviously I know that you have seen this one, but if anyone listening hasn't seen it, you should, because it is all about what do you believe? You know,
Hmm.
especially the film. So the film is very different from what the original script writers wanted. The ending, and there's a kind of frame narrative that was added, which kind of troubles what you're
Yeah,
looking at. And the film, I think, does ask you to think, what do you actually believe is happening. And you
yeah.
also then, at the center of the film, you have Dr. Caligari and the somnambulist Césaire. And essentially, spoiler, although this film is like over 100 years old, but I guess if you want to go and watch this film, then spoiler. But Dr. Caligari is using Caesar to commit murder. And I
Hmm.
think it is in that whole kind of that post-war period where there's a lot of, who is controlling who, the kind of
Yeah, that's what
the
I was gonna say. Like,
yeah,
the central anxiety of the film is about what can you do to somebody's mind, and
yes,
how can you shape somebody's mind. And if you think about the rise of Nazism and fascism, that idea of what can somebody make you do, and when is it too late, and will you even realize, and who does that make you become, like, it's such a terrifying precursor to the 1930s. But it's also like, if you think about like weird fiction and fin de siècle, like its position in the kind of like evolution of the genre, it really starts that terror around the idea of like brainwashing. If you
yeah,
think about things like the Manchurian Candidate after the Second World War, like, it really kicks that off. And I think that's something we're still really, really scared of in
absolutely.
like I think it's still a really scary film in 2025.
And I think even the ending. So in some ways, the writers of the film, they didn't like the ending because it does the whole, actually the person telling you the story is just a madman in an asylum and it's not real. But I think actually the ending is really interesting because
I like
you
the end.
can you can believe that, or you can believe that this is another one, yet another one of Dr. Caligari's manipulations. And
Yep.
again, it comes back to, who do you believe and who is manipulating
Yep.
who has power, and how
Hmm.
in control are you of your own narrative and identity.
Yep.
So yeah, I think this is a really, really fascinating film. Definitely
Oh, I'm
worth a
really glad
watch
you enjoyed it.
or a rewatch. Yeah, I did. Yeah. And then the second film. Now, I will be interested to know if you've seen the second film because it's also directed by Robert Wiene. And this is The Hands of Orlac.
I haven't seen this. So
Okay.
I watched Caligari in like a sort of was a module with a bunch of silent film, and I watched Caligari, Metropolis, the Dali film with the
Mm.
moon and everything, like,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
don't think there was multiple films by the same director on that course, so I think that's probably the only one I've actually seen.
This is why I wanted to do this, because I knew that you'd seen Caligari, but I thought if you haven't seen this, then this is one that you should watch. And again, it's a silent film. These are often really easy to get a hold
Mhm.
of and watch. And this one came out in 1924, so it's a little bit after Caligari, and it has a similar like aesthetic. So Caligari and The Hands of Orlac, the scene, like the set pieces are so beautiful, and they're really
Mhm.
stylized in that expressionist kind of way. So
Yeah, like,
again, like they're just
if you're, like, an Art
gorgeous to watch.
Nouveau or
Mm,
like, just a fan of, like, it sounds weird to say, like, if you're a fan of something like Mooka, but genuinely, like, if you like that 20s kind of
mm,
jazz era, really lush, really in-depth, really intricate, like, the kind of detail where you think, like, "God, on a screen in, like, 1920 whatever, how would you even have seen that?" But,
yeah,
like, it actually did, like, yeah, they're really beautiful sets and set
yeah.
design.
It's worth watching just for the sets alone. They're really gorgeous. But so this one, it's directed by Robert Wiene. The screenplay is by Louis Ners, and it's actually an adaptation of a French novel. So the French novel Le Mans d'Orlac by Maurice Renard, and I think this novel has also been adapted a few times.
I was gonna say the name, like, Orlac, I know it sounds
Orlac,
like Orlac, but,
yeah,
like, that sounds
yes,
familiar, I feel like,
yeah.
and I don't think it's just because it sounds like Orlac.
No, no, and you might be familiar or have heard of the story, but essentially it centers on Paul Orlac, who is played by Conrad Veidt, who plays Caesar in
Mhm,
Caligari. He is a renowned concert pianist, but at the start of the film, he is in a railway accident, and it's quite a bad railway accident, and his hands are injured and damaged, which is obviously like horrible if your entire
mhm,
identity
mhm,
and profession and employment is based on you being able to play the piano. Not having your
mhm.
like the ability to do that is like really wounding. So his wife Yvonne, who's played by Alexandra Serena, she pleads with a surgeon, Dr. Sarah, who's played by Hans Homer, to basically help to save his hands, and he agrees. Now, we're familiar with doctors in Gothic texts. So you can probably imagine that whilst he agrees, yes, I can help your husband and save his hands and give him back the ability to play the piano, it's not exactly above board.
Is this is this the one where he gives him a hand transplant and the hands are
It's
from a
yes,
murderer?
it's experimental surgery. He transplants the hands of a recently executed murderer called Vasseur onto Orlac. And then it's kind of a little bit like a psychological horror in
I
that
think I know this story.
Orlac cannot play the piano, but also he feels like his hands are not his.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really understand what's going on. And it's dramatized in a really chilling way. And then a series of murders start to happen with fingerprints that point to Vasseur. And obviously we know that
Mhm,
Vasseur's hands are on Orlac. So it's
mhm,
a very much in that kind of, I'm not going to spoil it because I think it's really interesting and you should go and watch this because it's brilliant. But it's like, is Orlac doing these murders? Are his hands controlling him? Is there something else going
mhm,
on here? It's very kind of like, again, like Caligari, you are questioning the narrative and you're questioning like, what am I doing, and who is responsible for these acts. But yeah, so fascinating, really interesting, well worth a watch. Especially if you love silent cinema or you love German cinema or you want something that is spooky but not
mhm.
your kind of scary horror film. This is an excellent choice.
More suited for a timid palate.
Yes. But it still has spooks, and it still has a lot of like tension and mystery
Yeah.
and
Well, Dr.
drama.
Caligari is really creepy. Like, it's a
Mm.
really, really creepy film.
Yeah.
It's mad kind of creepy.
Yes.
There's no jump scares, although it is quite tense.
It's very tense, yes. But that's exactly what you want, you know. It's a scary
Mm,
film that's just not like contemporary horror scary.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Like, I'm
those
sure if I was me in 1924, it probably would have scared the shit out of me.
yeah,
But with a modern
absolutely.
perspective, I can watch it and not be too terrified.
So those are my two retrospectives. Lauren, do you have any picks this week?
I do. I have two, and actually, one of them is a podcast that, funnily enough, aligns really nicely with Dr. Caligari.
Oh, excellent.
So it's actually a relatively old podcast. It's called Brainwashed, and it's by the CBC. It's by the CBC. Which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company. So the CBC actually put out quite a lot of really good investigative podcasts. They did one of the original Nexium podcasts, and I had been listening to something recently, and it just kind of came up on you should listen to this, and I could see it was completed. I was looking for something to listen to, and it said, there's this place in Canada. It used to be a fancy house called Ravenscrag, and it got turned into a hospital, and eventually became an asylum, essentially. And I found that really interesting from the get-go, because ever since I read The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood, I've been really fascinated by these houses in Canada that try to emulate British, particularly British, because most of the settlers were of British origin, but obviously some of them were French or European, but try to emulate these old European estates, but obviously lacked all of the history and the rest of it. So I always found that really interesting, but also because it seemed to be about this particular doctor called Dr. Cameron, and he did this very, very strange, very intense treatment. I'm not going to spoil what happens, because actually I did not expect the investigation to go where the investigation went. I was very surprised when certain names and words started cropping up, because I was like, oh, I thought I was listening to a podcast about this hospital. But essentially, it's an investigative look at this particular Canadian institution that did a psychological treatment on people that was absolutely abhorrent. People paid a lot of money for this treatment in some respects. Like, he was a well-respected doctor. He was like the head of the Canadian Psychological Association, and it unravels and unwraps why he was doing this really horrendous treatment, what he thought he was going to achieve, what he was actually trying to do to people, and then where did the money come from, who was benefiting off of this. And over the kind of 8 episodes, it just unravels this really fascinating look into modern psychology, psychiatry, and this idea of brainwashing, and brainwashing for shall we say, statewide usage. So if you are interested in that kind of history, I would absolutely recommend this podcast. Really, really fascinating. I binged the whole thing in the course of like one weekend. Really well reported, really well thought out, does that nice blend of talking to the lawyers, the doctors, the historians, the families, the patients themselves, but also thinking about who was this person and why did he do this. They talked to his son at one point. Really well made podcast. So if you're interested in something kind of with, something like Caligari, but in real life, would highly recommend this podcast. And then I also want to recommend a Korean drama that's currently on Disney Plus. I didn't realize that it wasn't finished. I thought it was finished when I started watching it.
Oh
So I
no.
apologize if like the last 2 episodes are really bad and I've recommended this. But hopefully they're not. So this drama is called The Manipulated, And you might be surprised that I'm recommending it, because it might not seem like something I would watch, because it is quite violent and it is quite dark. And there were a couple of times where I had to look away, or I skipped through the long fight scenes. But as with most Korean drama, it signals really well when something violent is about to happen. And I do like an action film. So when it's choreographed violence, when it's almost kind of like a dance, I don't mind it. Obviously, if it starts to get very bloody and very aggressive, then like sometimes I do need to skip over. But the concept of this drama is basically, the first episode starts like any K-drama. And I was like, oh, did I misunderstand what this was about? You've got this guy in his 30s, he's raising his teenage brother. He's about to open his own cafe and flower shop with his friends. He's got this lovely girlfriend. He's happy, he's in love, he's honoring his mum's memory. He's played really well by quite a famous drama actor called Ji Chang-woo. And at the basically end of the first episode, he is arrested for the rape and murder of a young woman. And he is like, what the hell, basically. Like, it comes out of nowhere. And we realize that he has been set up as a patsy, or as the show calls it, an avatar. And he has been manipulated by this guy who is this like classic sociopathic, borderline psychopathic rich guy who basically runs a company for rich Korean families, so politicians, company owners, to fix and clean up their messes. And we realized that like his every move was tracked, so that like his phone was in the right place, his they steal his rubbish so they can plant his DNA at the scene. They do all of these things so that he seems, it's irrefutable, despite the fact that his friends and family are like, he could not have done this, and he goes to prison. I then thought maybe this is a show about him breaking out of prison. No, it's basically a show about the corruption in Korea, about the horrendous violence in the prison system, and it follows a similar sort of theme to something like Squid Games. And it's just, I'm just really enjoying the sort of the dynamic of it all. I don't obviously necessarily like love all of, some of it is quite violent. But the main reason I started watching this is because my number one favorite Korean idol, who is a guy called Do Kyung-soo, who is a member of EXO, but he's also a really, really good actor, like genuinely a really talented actor. And as Mary knows, I've watched a couple of his films. One of them is called Room 7, which is a black comedy. So he's quite good at this sort of like Korean dark black comedy thing. And essentially his character is this CEO of this cleanup company, and he's bored. Like, he invests in a racing car team, and then when he finds out that they won't let the car go as fast as humanly possible because it might injure the driver, he's like, well, how do I get over my boredom? And it's kind of a comment on this kind of ongoing issue with these young Koreans, particularly males, who have been born into wealth and privilege and money, and because of the way the system works, haven't really ever been challenged on anything. So they keep pushing the boundaries further and further and further and further. And obviously he's doing that, but he's also like cleaning up after these people, and he gets this kick off the manipulation. So yeah, the last 2 episodes might be really terrible. I apologize if they are. But the first 8 episodes are really entertaining. If you liked Squid Game and you're looking for something that kind of captures that same essence, if you liked, something like Parasite, or if you're looking for something that bridges that gap between a psychological thriller and an action movie, it's not quite a horror, and it might not be for everybody that enjoys this podcast. But that was just something I watched recently where I thought a lot of the themes in this share a lot of similarities with something like a Bong Joon-ho. And there is some interesting kind of Catholic elements to it as well, and the idea of what's deserved and undeserved, and what's righteous and what's not righteous. And it's, yeah, really interesting character study. And my guy is playing a real good villain. Like, he's a real sort of just unhinged, like, video game gothic villain. And he's really, really good in it. And does his best. I think, you know, when you've got someone who is known for being likable, like, he's
Yeah.
known for being this, he's got this beautiful voice, he's got, you know, he's quite soft, he's got this, well, it's a deep voice, but quite softly spoken. And you know, he's always comes across as a very nice, kind, and gentle person. And when you see them play a villain, you're like, whoa. Which I think, yeah, when you're not used to seeing someone play villainous, it has even more oomph to it. So yeah, they're my two recommendations: Brainwashed by the CBC and The Manipulated on Disney Plus.
I thank you, because I think in some ways they're so different from my recommendations, but then also there are like these kind of themes that I think are in all of these things, like
Well,
manipulation and brainwashing and who do you trust and what's real and
yeah, when you were
you
talking about him, I was thinking, interesting,
yeah.
we've got some overlap here that I didn't anticipate.
And I always appreciate your podcast recommendations because it gets me out of my politics bubble. uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
so this is another episode of So You Don't Like Horror. Hopefully you have found or discovered something new that you can watch or listen to. And as ever, if you want to recommend your own thing to watch, then email us or comment or send us a message at the Ghoul Guides. We will find it however you send it to us. And we'll
Yeah.
feature you in our next episode in our audience recommends section. But yeah, I think that is more than enough to be getting on with. So I guess then until next time, stay safe and stay spooky.
Stay safe and stay spooky, everybody.